Hello everyone, I am the storyteller. Tonight I'll tell you a story wrapped in shadow and silence, and experience Dr. Elena Rossi could never explain, though it followed her long after she left the island. Close your eyes, listen to the distant lapping of waves against forgotten stone, and discover what happened when she stepped onto a place that shouldn't exist, a place that remembers everyone. Even if they've forgotten themselves, I remember the boat ride, but not the man who brought me. His face slips like fog when I try to picture it, blurred edges, missing teeth that weren't quite where they should be. We cut across the lagoon under a sky the color of bull lead, the wind off the Adriatic cold and salt rough. The island loomed ahead, gray ruins, broken walls, a leaning bell tower like a snapped bone pointing at the sky. I remember thinking, there's no God here, not anymore. When I stepped onto the dock, my compass spun counterclockwise in frantic circles. I told myself it was magnetic interference, some leftover iron buried in the mud. I told myself many things that day. Most of them lies, or maybe warnings. The first scream came that night. I found no mouth to match it. You don't land on Poveglia, you trespass it. It doesn't roll out a welcome mat. It slaps your boots with stagnant water and dares you to keep walking. I came with gear, to portable EEG units, voice recorders, a biometric sleep cap, notebooks, backups. My sponsor called it a historical trauma mapping expedition. I called it what it was, a test case for applied neuroarchaeology, a theory I was trying to make stick with the Italian research boards. We were going to map trauma signatures in places of mass death. Poveglia, with its plague pits and asylum ruins, was perfect. Too perfect. But the minute my boots hit the gravel at the dock, I felt lighter, not in a good way, like something had taken a chunk out of my shadow. Marco was already there, lean, wiry, leather face like a dried fig, boots older than my career. The island's dead, he said in Italian, but sometimes it doesn't know it. I asked him if there was electricity in the guardhouse. He gave me a long look, then said yes, like the word tasted wrong. I should have turned back then. Instead, I signed the waiver, took the keys, and unlocked the gate. The gate made a noise I still hear when I sleep, not a creak, more like breath through ruined teeth. Inside, everything was off, wrong. The vegetation grew in spirals, vines that coiled inward. The ivy on the bell tower had grown down, not up. There were birds, but they sang the same broken sequence over and over, like someone skipping through a memory loop. I checked my phone, 0 bars. I set up base in what used to be the administrative office. Mold on the walls, dust an inch thick. A cot, my recording rig, a small diesel generator that Marco insisted was reliable. I unpacked the sensors and laid out the EEG gear on a rusted table that looked like it had been bled on. My breath fogged in the air even though it was made dot that first night. I recorded sleep data, just baseline stuff, no readings from anyone but me. I ran the cap, the dream triggers, the whole setup. It was supposed to take weeks for any patterns to emerge, but something pulsed back through the signal on the very first night. Not brain waves, something else, something watching. In the morning, there were footprints outside the office, barefoot, deep, human, but they were on the ceiling. I didn't sleep after I saw them, those barefoot prints on the ceiling. Toes pointed toward the hallway as if someone had stood above me upside down, watching. I told myself it was pareidolia, a trick of moisture and old paint. The brain trying to find faces, patterns, order in chaos. But I didn't believe it, not even little. The prints were still damp. I measured them with a caliper from my field kit, roughly size 38, narrow instep. Female, maybe adolescent. The stride was short, not a sprint, but deliberate, like someone pacing or hovering. There were no matching prints on the floor. Marco arrived around noon with canned food and bottled water. He walked stiff, like he was trying not to step on something I couldn't see. "I need to ask you something," I said, motioning toward the office with the prints. He held up a finger. "Not inside. You feel it too." "No." He didn't wait for my answer. Instead, he sat on a crumbling wall where vines curl like veins. His hands trembled slightly as he lit a cigarette with a weather-beaten Zippo that had 1978 etched into the side. "Before the war," he said, "they buried them in trenches. Not coffins, just sacks of skin and heat. They burned from the inside. Black plague, bubonic, one day. Smoke from 30,000 mouths all in one column." He exhaled hard. "Island remembers." I didn't respond. I couldn't. There was something in his voice like he wasn't telling me history. He was remembering it. Back in the office, I ran the sleep data from last night. There was something embedded in the EEG, recording an irregular spike around 3:14 a.m., not alpha, beta, delta, or any natural rhythm. It was too fast, nearly 70 hertz, like a tremor inside the brainstem. A resonance. That's when the voice came through the playback. I nearly knocked the laptop off the table. It wasn't mine. I hadn't spoken during sleep. My biometric sensors confirmed silence. Breath steady, no REM speech. But clear as a throat closed to my ear, I heard, "Don't look under the cot." I paused the audio, played it again, slowed it, amplified it. It didn't change. The voice was female, raspy and wet. Italian accent, but wrong, like the cadence was off, like it had learned the language by copying breathing patterns, not grammar. I hadn't looked under the cot. I did now. There was nothing except, scratched into the tile, so faint I wouldn't have noticed unless I was on the floor, was a single word, feminine. That night I didn't sleep. I refused to sleep, but I must have, because I remember the dream. I am in a white room with a metal grate in the floor. Heat radiates, but there's no fire. The walls breathe. I hear scratching, slow and purposeful, from beneath the grate. Then her voice. They opened my skull to make room for God, but he didn't come in. I try to scream, but my mouth is full of ash. My teeth fall out one by one. Each tooth turns to a small silver key when it hits the floor. I wake up coughing. Something's burning. I stagger outside. The sky is flickering, like lightning without clouds. My generator has blown. I smell ozone and burning plastic. The E-unit is fried. The island is absolutely silent. Not the peaceful kind of silence, the wrong kind. The kind that waits for you to speak first. In the dark, I hear it again, the voice from the audio. Not a recording this time. Live, don't look under the cot. But I'm not in the office. I'm outside, and the voice is coming from inside the bell tower. I stood motionless for what felt like minutes. The echo of her voice. Don't look under the cot. Still clinging to the inside of my ears like oil. The bell tower loomed 20 meters away, slouching out of the earth like a pulled tooth from a giant's jaw. Vines strangled its stone ribs. The entrance, a half-collapsed arch, was sealed with rusted chain-link fencing, but something behind it breathed. I didn't hear it, I felt it, deep in my molars. I've studied hallucinations, temporal lobe seizures, schizophrenia, sleep paralysis, sensor misfire from prolonged isolation. I know how the brain can fold reality like paper. I know all of this. And yet I started walking toward the tower anyway. The air around it felt dense, like the molecules were stacked too tightly. My steps slowed without conscious effort. The dust kicked up off the cobbled path didn't fall back down. It just hung there, shimmering, suspended mid-air as if gravity had forgotten it. I stopped at the gate. The padlock was ancient, pitted with corrosion, still locked. Then I saw something that made my breath stop short. A handprint on the inside of the gate. Fresh, small, as if someone knew. Something had pressed against it with wet skin. 5 fingers splayed. The pinky was bent unnaturally outward. I took a photo with my phone. The screen showed nothing, just rust and wire. I took another. This time, my phone wouldn't focus at all. The screen blurred and jumped, jittering like static. Then it froze, and for a fraction of a second, before the camera app crashed, the face appeared, upside down, mouth wide, smiling. Back in the office, I tried to write in my field journal, but my hands shook too hard. My entries were erratic, looping, sometimes written backward. I kept repeating the same phrase without realizing it. I am not the first. I found it on 6 separate pages, none of which I remembered writing. At 2:17 a.m., the generators sputtered back to life on their own. I hadn't touched them, hadn't tried. The lights in the office flickered, then stabilized. Then the printer disconnected, and plug began to churn. It spat out a single page. A photo, blurry, brainy, low-res. It was me, standing in the bell tower's threshold. But I hadn't been in the tower, not yet, and my eyes in the photo, they weren't my eyes. They were milk-white and clotted, like old film negatives soaked in bleach. The next morning, Marco wasn't at the dock. Instead, I found a woman sitting at the far edge of the island where the stone breaks into open water. She looked impossibly old skin like paper bark, her black dress soaked with sea mist. I had never seen her before. She looked up when I approached. Her eyes didn't track me, they listened to me. She smiled, revealing teeth filed into blunt nubs. "Have they told you your name yet?" she asked in Italian. I paused. "What?" she chuckled. "They always forget the name first. It's how the land eats." I crouched beside her. "Who are you?" She plucked something from the folds of her dress and handed it to me. A photograph, sepia-toned, brittle, clearly antique. It showed a group of doctors in white coats standing in front of the old asylum entrance. 8 men, 2 women. One of them was me. Not someone who looked like me. Me, same face, same eyes, standing dead center. I looked back up, breath caught in my throat. But the woman was gone. Only the photo remained. I am strapped to a slab. My eyes are sewn open with fine silver thread. Above me, a figure in a plague mask tilts its head. Its eyes drip tar. The ceiling opens into sky, but the stars are wrong to close breathing. Someone whispers, "Every soul is a story. This island is full of stories." Then I see it. The trigger object, a mirror, old, hand-held ivory handle. My reflection is not mine, it is her, the girl from the footprints. I wake vomiting seawater. My bed is soaked. The sheets smell like algae and rot. I stumble to the window. My reflection stares back at me from the glass, but it blinks out of sync and smiles. I didn't leave the room for 6 hours. I couldn't. Every time I reach the door, something in me recoiled, like crossing the threshold would split me in two, like I might meet myself on the other side. Instead, I locked myself inside and began combing through the supply trunk I had brought, desperate for structure, for anything grounded. I needed something to tell me I was still Elena Rossi, that I was a neuroscientist, not whatever the island was trying to make of me. At the bottom of the trunk, under the EEG headsets and sleep monitors, was the envelope Marco had given me the first night. I'd forgotten it entirely. It was unmarked. Inside, a brittle file folder. On the cover, Ospedale Psichiatrico di Poveglia minus 1932. Reparto 6. Sperimental, non official, progetto specchio. I held it for a long time before opening it. The folder was ice cold. My fingertips ached. It wasn't a report. It was confession. Handwritten, rambling notes, presumably from a man named Alessio Bernardi, a specialist in visual cognition and anomaly thresholds. The first few pages were standard psychiatric gibberish references to mescaline therapy, mirror neurons, Rorschach deviations. But then it unraveled. The patients dream in circles. They speak in voices that overlap, not schizophrenia, more like echoes from somewhere deeper. They say things before they hear them. One subject recited my own thoughts back to me. Before I had written them, the mirror is the anchor. It shows the truth to Early. It's how she got through. He never named her, only referred to her as the primary subject. She has no birth record, no lineage. She came with the fog in 1882. And as not aged. The others see her, then forget they did. She does not appear in photographs unless the negative is reversed. Then the line that made my throat lock, the mirror used in her testing, was passed down from the convent. The ivory handle carved from human femur. All others broke when exposed to her image. Only this one holds. There was a photo stapled to the last page. Grainy, poor exposure. A girl, maybe 15, wearing a hospital smock, hair hanging over her face. She stood in front of a mirror. The mirror showed her smiling. She wasn't smiling in the photo. I threw the file across the room. The photo landed face down on the floor. I wanted to burn it, bury it, anything. But the mirror in the photo, the one with the ivory handle, I'd seen it before in my dream last night under the plague mask. But there was no way I could have remembered that detail unless the dream came after the folder, or the dream came from the folder. I left the office, feet moving without permission. The light outside had changed. It was midday. But the shadows were sharp and low, like dusk. I crossed the courtyard to the remnants of what had once been the asylum chapel. Half the roof was gone, taken by a fire long ago inside. Birds nested in the rafters, and something darker nested below. I found the chapel floor covered in dust. But a trail had been cleared to narrow, clean lines like someone had dragged their heels backward. They led to the altar, and on the altar, impossibly intact, sat the mirror, Just as described, ivory handle, hairline cracks in the glass, streaked with something that looked like soot or blood. I didn't pick it up. I shouldn't have picked it up, but my hands moved anyway. When my fingers touched the handle, the air around me compressed. Heavy sound dropped out except my own breathing. The glass didn't reflect me. It showed the cot, my cot, in the office, and underneath it, a face, half-rotted, eyes open, a gash where the mouth should be. Not dead, watching. Then, in the glass, the mouth began to open, and I heard her voice, inside my skull this time. "It's not a mirror, it's a door, you left it open." I dropped it. The sound echoed too long, bouncing through the chapel like it had fallen into a much larger space than the ruined room around me. When I turned to leave, Marco was standing in the doorway. He wasn't alone. The old woman, the one from the sea wall, stood beside him. Her eyes were pitch black. They didn't speak at first. Marco stood like a puppet waiting for his cue. The old woman smiled, calm, knowing. Her black eyes glinted like obsidian, unblinking. "What the hell is this?" I asked, my voice cracked. "Who is she?" Marco didn't answer. The old woman took a step forward, moving like her joints had learned the wrong angles. Her dress whispered across the chapel stones. "You were here before," she said, "before the place had walls, before the plague, before the bell tower rang with bones. I'm not here for ghosts," I snapped. "I'm here to record trauma signatures, memory fragments, neurological residues." Her smile deepened. "Exactly." Back in the office, I locked the door, pushed a file cabinet against it. I needed to think to put things back in sequence. The timeline had started to slip. Day 1. Arrival, compass malfunction. Night 1. Auditory hallucination, footprints. Day 2. EG anomaly, dream 1. Night 2. Generator failure, printout photo. Day 3. Discovery of asylum documents, mirror, dream 2. But when I reviewed the date stamps on my EG gear, something didn't match. The readings from night 1 were labeled May 17th. The calendar on my laptop said May 24th. 7 days had vanished. There were notes in my journal pages I didn't remember writing. One entry simply read, "She knows when you forget to verify." I checked the sleep monitor data on my laptop again. I ran a playback of the full neural activity from the first night. Delta waves, REM, sporadic spikes. Then there, a hard jump in frequency. I froze the frame. There was a .02-second burst of recorded video. That wasn't possible. The EG gear didn't record video, but I watched it. A single frame, the cot, the mirror, me sleeping, and someone standing over me, holding something to my forehead. Not Marco, not the woman, me. That night I didn't dream. Not in the usual sense. It was memory, maybe. A reconstructed one. Not mine. I stood in an open field, dry grass, cracked earth. A dust storm swirled in the distance. The sky was burning orange, like film catching fire in slow motion. A figure walked toward me, young woman. Her face was the same as in the mirror photo. She wore a 1930s patient smock, barefoot, no shadow. She pointed behind me. I turned. A church made of salt and bone stood on the horizon, ringing bells that made no sound. Then her voice again. "Do you remember who you were before you were Elena Rossi?" I woke, gasping, and I knew. I was never meant to leave this island. The mirror is now following me. I left it in the chapel. but it was in the office when I returned, sitting on my notebook. The crack in the glass had lengthened. It now traced the shape of a spiral one that moved inward, tighter, vanishing into a pinpoint void. That night I locked it inside the file cabinet. The next morning, it was on my pillow. I confronted Marco that evening. He was standing on the island's western edge, looking toward the mainland. "You knew," I said. "You brought me here." He didn't deny it. "We've all brought you here," he said. I saw something flash in his eyes, pain, maybe guilt. Then he said something I didn't understand until later. "This place isn't haunted, Dottoressa. It's haunting, present tense, ongoing action, and you're its favorite verb." He handed me a folded piece of paper and walked into the woods. I opened it, a grainy black and white photo. The woman from the mirror, holding the hand of a small child. Written on the back, in shaking ink, "Find where she was buried. Then find where she got up." The photo haunted me. The way the girl's hand curled around the child's, the way both stared directly into the camera, no fear, no curiosity, just knowing, and the background. A crumbling stairwell descending into shadow, lined with stone, the kind of stone you don't see in hospitals, the kind you see in crypts. I'd scoured every map, every blueprint of the island before coming. Nothing indicated a sub-level beneath the chapel ruins or the asylum. But I knew what I was looking at, an entrance to something that wasn't supposed to be found. Marco was gone, the old woman too. I didn't see them again that day. I packed to torches, rope, a portable scanner, and a vial of adrenaline standard for prolonged isolation testing. I wasn't sure what I thought I'd find beneath a building abandoned for nearly a century, but I knew it would know I was coming. I returned to the chapel at dusk. The mirror was gone. That should have been a relief. It wasn't. The altar had shifted push slightly left. A fine seam of dust marked its movement. I gripped the edge and heaved beneath it. Stone steps, narrow and steep, disappearing into blackness, old, but not untouched. There were footprints in the dust, barefoot, small, the same as the ones from the ceiling on my first night. Halfway down the stairwell, the temperature dropped 30 degrees. My breath fogged, my torch sputtered. The walls here weren't concrete or brick. They were carved limestone, chiseled, etched. Every 10 feet, a sigil repeating, crude and ancient, and I, inside a spiral, being closed. The deeper I went, the more the space disagreed with geometry. Corners didn't meet correctly. Steps widened in one direction, narrowed in the other. Light bent oddly, making the path seem longer when I turned around. And the smell, salt and decay, but under it, a hint of lavender so specific it made me think of my mother's perfume. That was when I knew. The place was already inside my head. At the bottom, I entered a hall of doors, arched, iron-rimmed, none labeled except one marked Reparto Specchio, the mirror ward. My palms went clammy. I reached for the handle. The metal was warm. Inside, a gallery of beds, 10, maybe 12, each with restraints. At the center stood a surgical chair, rusted, stained, bolted to the ground. Surrounding it were shards of broken mirrors, dozens, maybe hundreds, each fragment etched with a number. No dust, no cobwebs, like it had been cleaned recently. Then I saw it, the ivory-handled mirror, lying at the base of the surgical chair, cracked but intact. Waiting, I picked it up. The room changed. not literally. But in the glass reflected I saw it as it had been. The beds full, patients strapped, twitching, nurses in starched uniforms, mouths open in silent scream, a doctor standing at the surgical chair. Me. Not someone like me. Me. I wore the old hospital whites. My eyes were sunken, my hands held a scalpel. I turned toward the mirror and looked directly at myself. You weren't ready then, the reflection said. Are you ready now? I dropped the mirror. It didn't fall, it floated, gently settling back onto the floor. At the far end of the ward, a figure stood in the doorway. A child, the same child from the photo. She stepped forward, slow and barefoot, eyes black with bleeding edges. She opened her mouth and I heard dozens of voices spill out, layered, echoing, writhing in languages I half recognized from anthropology texts. You woke her. Now she remembers. Who? I asked. I didn't recognize my voice. It was hoarse, hollow. The child didn't answer. She pointed to the wall, and on the far wall, in fresh black strokes, was a name. Aileen Olivia Bernardi. Not Rossi, Bernardi, the name from the folder. The doctor who wrote about the experiments. I stumbled back. That's not me. It was, it is. Then she vanished. I left the mirror ward shaking. The walls whispered behind me as I ascended, the sound of mirrors cracking like ice underfoot. At the top of the stairs, the mirror was back in my hands, and behind it, scrawled in blood above the altar. Time doesn't move here. IT turns back. I don't know what day it is anymore. The clocks on my devices freeze at 3:14 a.m. No matter how many times I reset them. My notes have started correcting themselves. Lines I remember writing one way now read differently. Whole pages appear overnight, written in my own hand, but with ideas I've never had, or maybe I have just not yet. I sat on the dock this morning, trying to record a log entry, experiment day, cognitive degradation advancing, auditory hallucinations persist, mirror appears at will, data corrupted, Marco no longer visible, water surrounding island no longer reflects sky, have not slept without nightmares in uncertain duration. My mouth moved, I spoke the words, but the recorder played something else back. You're almost back where you started. The voice wasn't mine. It was my voice 30 years older. I saw her by the water. Late afternoon, light, thin, and metallic. I was circling the island's southern edge, near the old crematorium, when I saw movement across the grass. At first I thought it was Marco, but the figure was smaller, more familiar. She stood barefoot on a stone platform, back to me, arms hanging limp at her sides. She wore a hospital gown, tattered at the hem, and her hair was pulled back just like I wear it when I'm in the lab. She turned, it was me. But not a reflection, not a hallucination. There was weight to her, shadows bent around her body. Her chest rose and fell. She blinked out of sync with me. My mouth went dry. Who are you? She cocked her head, and her voice came like a sigh across glass, the version that didn't leave. The one who stayed, the one who let it in. I took a step closer. The air between us shimmered, as if the light couldn't agree on what it was showing. Why am I here? I asked. What is this island? She smiled a slow, terrible thing. It's not the island, Elena. It's you. Then she reached into her pocket and handed me something. A scalpel, dried blood on the blade. When you remember why you came, You'll know what to do." She turned and walked into the sea. I screamed, ran to the edge, but the waves were flat, undisturbed. There were no footprints in the sand. Back in the office, I tore through my research files, looking for anything to ground myself. Then I found the transcript, an interview I had conducted before coming here, with a woman named Teresa Lombardi, a supposed survivor of the Poveglia experiments. It had been decades ago, 1957. She was 8 at the time. I'd only interviewed her as a historical footnote, but the transcript had changed. I hadn't written these words. I never asked this question. "Elena, and what did the woman in white say to you?" "Teresa. She said I would come back someday. She said I'd be here again." I flipped to the bottom, the signature. Interviewer, Elena Olivia Bernardi. Not Rossi. There it was again, like a scar beneath the skin. Setting, Salt Flats, sky made of fire. A church in the distance made entirely of human spines. I stand at the altar. A child is placed before me. I am wearing the white coat. I am holding the mirror. She can't cross without forgetting. Someone whispers. So she left the forgetting behind. I turn the mirror to the child. The child is me. She screams. I woke in tears. Blood on my pillow. From my nose, I think, I hope, the mirror sat at the end of the cot. The crack in the glass had grown. There was something new inside it. Another version of me, watching, smiling. That evening, I found a new object on the dock. A child's shoe, waterlogged, wrapped in gauze. Inside the shoe, a note written in my handwriting. I remember now, we all came from the same wound, and scratched into the wood beneath it, to leave. You must become the first. The island's silence has changed. It's no longer absence, it's containment. Like the air is holding its breath. Like the earth is waiting. Everything is slower now. My steps feel heavy, and sound doesn't travel the way it should. I've stopped hearing birds. Even the insects are gone. The shoe on the dock is still damp, though the sun has been out for hours. I haven't moved it. I don't think I can. It feels like a part of me. I found him in the incinerator room, a place I had deliberately avoided until now. He was sitting cross-legged on a blackened bench, surrounded by stacks of paper, some fused into solid bricks by time and heat. He looked up when I entered, but didn't speak. Thin, pale, heavy glasses that magnified his eyes until they looked like bottomless wells. "You're not supposed to be here," I said. He tilted his head. "Neither are you." "Are you real?" He considered this. Sometimes I crossed the ash-streaked floor. My boots left no prints. "What do you do here?" I remember what the island forgets. And sometimes I forget what it remembers. I sat beside him. He handed me a folder wrapped in cloth. The paper inside smelled of oil and rot. On the top sheet, Project Mirror. Primary findings. The mirror does not reflect, it recalls. It pulls memory from what's buried and births it whole. Time is elastic. Identity is recursive. Exposure leads to recursion collapse. Subject 0 displayed total self-inversion within 14 days. "What does that mean?" I asked. The archivist leaned close. "It means you've done this before, and each time you came back a little less." Back in the office, I mapped it all out on the wall. Photos, journal pages, EEG readouts, patient records, dreams. I drew connections. Red string, Penzai made my own crime scene. But it didn't form a map. It formed a spiral, a descending loop. Each version of me had returned to the island under a new name, a new context, a new story. Elena Bernardi, Livia Alessandri, Dr. Rosa DeLucci, Elena Rossi, all cognitive scientists, all brought here under the guise of research, all documenting residual trauma phenomena, all losing themselves. I looked at the mirror, now blackened. The spiral in its glass had stopped spinning. Now it throbbed. I listened again to Teresa Lombardi's voice from the tape. This time I heard the part I'd missed before, hidden under static. She didn't start on the island. She came from somewhere older. They built the mirror to contain her. But it only held her memory, not her. She's still looking for someone who remembers being here that night I found the grave. Not on a map, not marked, just a mound behind the bell tower, ringed with rusted stakes and old barbed wire. The earth was too soft for how dry the season had been. Something had disturbed it recently. I dug with my hands. Found bone, dot, then fabric, then the mirror. Not the one I'd been carrying, older, pristine. Uncracked, I pulled it free, and in its glass I saw her, the girl, the one from the dreams, the file, the chapel, the ward. She was no longer smiling. She looked afraid, and behind her something moved, massive, rooted with too many eyes. Then I saw myself beside her. Not any version I recognized, an original, the first, Elena Olivia Bernardi. She opened her mouth, and I heard everything at once. Thousands of voices, all me, all her, all screaming. The mirror dropped from my hand, but the sound didn't stop. The mirror didn't shatter. It turned, faced upward, and the sky and the reflection was not the sky above. It was a mouth, and it was opening. Time ruptured, not metaphorically. Not the poetic kind of rupture you read about in cheap fiction or hear whispered by trauma patients. No, this was a physical failure, the temporal structure of my reality. My body stayed in the graveyard, but everything else came loose. It didn't unfold. It collapsed. I was in the asylum in 1932. The hallways were clean. Electric light buzzed overhead. Patients shuffled in slippers. A bell rang from the east wing, and I knew what it meant, because I'd lived it, because I'd ordered it. I looked down, white coat, blood on the sleeves, a notepad in my hand, labeled Dr. Elena Olivia Bernardi, primary observer. I knew the date. April 12th, 1932, the day the girl disappeared. Then the scene tore like paper, and I was in 1976, standing in front of a camera. "You are Dr. Rosa DeLucci," the voice off-screen said. "You believe in emergent memory fields." I nodded, not because I agreed, but because that's what Rosa had done. Because that was me. Flash, tear, reroute. I stood in a white lab in Rome, 2006. Livia Alessandri, developing acoustic mapping of trauma signatures, holding a pitch finder tuned to infrasound, testing on patients with sleep disorders. The name Poveglia circled in red on a map. A voice whispered behind me, "They always circle it. They always come. It's how the mirror brings you home." Then blackness, utter. Then the island again, night back in my body, kneeling beside the grave, the mirror still intact. But now I remembered all of it. I staggered back to the office. My walls had changed. The map I'd made was gone, replaced by mural scenes from the dreams burned into the plaster. The woman, the child, the scalpel, the open mouth. The mirror tree. That was what it really was. That was what they had buried. Not a girl, not a patient. A root system of memory planted in flesh, grown from trauma, fed with recurrence. They tried to contain it with geometry, drugs, language, ritual, but mirrors don't hold evil, they show it. And when you stare long enough, it starts remembering you. Then came the nose, low, vibrating the floorboards, my ribs. It wasn't sound, it was recognition. It said the first was a question. And I understood. I remembered the test. Back in 1932, the girl sitting in the chair, I had asked her a question. The same question I'd forgotten through every lifetime. What did you see? She looked at me with those glass black eyes and whispered something. I never recorded it. I buried it because I was afraid. Now I heard it again clear. I saw myself. I returned to the chapel. I moved the altar again. This time the stairs didn't lead down. They led around a spiral, descending sideways. The architecture was impossible. The farther I walked, the more the walls began to bend inward, as if I were inside the stem of something living. The air thinned. The mirror hummed in my hand. I reached a chamber of bone perfectly spherical. In the center stood a tree. Not wood, not stone, reflected matter. A structure made of mirrors twisting, spiraling, feeding itself, growing from the corpse of a girl at its base. My corpse, one of them. There were many, all of me, arranged in a circle like petals. Dead eyes turned upward. Each face bore a different age, different version. All returned, all remembered, all failed. The tree whispered, "You are not the first, but you can be the last. Step inside, become the root, complete the mirror in my hand pulsed. And I heard a new voice, not one of mine, a child's, or break it. I held the mirror like it was alive, because by now I knew it was. Every breath I took, it matched. Every hesitation, every thought, I could feel it anticipating me, urging me. The mirror tree whispered, completion brings stillness, become the root, let memory feed. But the child's voice, clear, young, and unbroken, said only one word again, break. I didn't know who she was. Maybe she was the original. Maybe she was the part of me that hadn't forgotten how to fight. I stood surrounded by dead versions of myself, bones in lab coats, eye sockets still wide with the final realization. They had all chosen wrong. They entered, joined, remembered too much. Become too much. There were notes pinned to their bodies, scratched into arms, etched into bone. Not this time. I am still in here. We fed it everything. But one skull bore a single word inside its cracked dome. Rebel. I raised the mirror above my head. The glass turned black, then red, then started showing things that hadn't happened, couldn't happen. Me digging my own grave. Me performing surgery on the archivist. Me cutting a spiral into a child's back. I staggered. The mirror was heavy now, unbearably so. A force pressing downward, not gravity. Guilt. The mirror tree screamed without sound. The dead selves began to rise, mouths open, bones twisting, hands grasping. I closed my eyes. I slammed the mirror against the tree. Once, twice, the third strike, it cracked. A sound like every memory I'd ever had being torn in half rang out across the spiral chamber. The mirror's spiral shattered inward. Light burst from its center, not warm, searing, and then everything stopped. The mirror tree began to disintegrate. Not fall, not burn, it forgot itself. It faded like an erased dream. One by one, the other Elenas vanished, bones to dust, dust to nothing. The mirror crumbled into my hands, the ivory handle softening, wilting like flesh that had been cooked too long. Then I was alone. I awoke in the office, daylight, real daylight. My hands were my own, my heartbeat was slow. My notes were gone, the walls bare. I checked my phone. May 17th, 2023. One day after arrival, all equipment intact. Generator full, the mirror was gone. The mirror was gone that afternoon. Marco came to the dock. He looked older, quieter. He said nothing when he saw me, just nodded once, as if confirming something. "You remember?" I asked. He hesitated. "No, but you do." I boarded the boat. We left the island in silence. Back in Rome, I sleep better. Mostly the hallucinations stop. The data returned clean. No files are corrupted. No new journal pages appear. No dreams except once. I saw a girl standing on the shore of an island. She held a mirror. It was whole again. At my apartment window, the sun sets. In the glass, I see my reflection. It blinks twice. It's been 18 days since I left the island. Rome feels thin. Sounds don't land the way they used to. My footsteps echo in hallways that shouldn't echo. When I speak, people sometimes don't hear me until I say it again, exactly the same. Then they blink and nod like nothing happened. I haven't told anyone what really occurred. I couldn't. There's no scientific language for what the mirror did, for what it was, and even if there were, the words would collapse under the weight of their own implications. Still, something stayed with me. Not the mirror, something beneath it. I run experiments now on myself. Control logs, memory reconstructions, stimuli response cycles. My data shows minor discrepancies. I can't always remember the right year for my birth date. I forget the order of events in familiar films. I'll think of a word and feel like I've already said it. Minor things until they aren't. I got a call last week from my university's archive department. They said they'd received a mislabeled file from an anonymous sender. Said it was addressed to me. I picked it up. No return address. Inside was a single object. The photo, the girl, the child, holding hands, but this time I wasn't in the picture. Someone else was, a man, early 40s, lean face, leather jacket, staring right into the lens, scrawled on the back. Next cycle begins in Sardinia, Monte Cristo sector. It always starts with memory. I visited the archivist. He lives in an abandoned chapel on the outskirts of town now, filing things no one remembers writing. He looked Worscott, glassy-eyed, ... He didn't recognize me at first. Then, as if a switch flipped, he whispered, "You pulled the root, but not the seed." I asked what he meant. He smiled sadly. "You were the last to remember. But you won't be the last to look. I still dream of mirrors, but now I never see myself in them. Just flashes of others, some familiar, some not. Sometimes I see the girl, sometimes I see the tree. Once I saw the archivist standing behind me in the dream, hands clasped, whispering something I couldn't hear. When I turned around, he wasn't there. The dream ended with a voice. The root's been cut, but the memory feeds. It will always grow back. I returned to my office yesterday and found a letter on my desk, typed and signed. Inside was a single sentence. "We are what we remember. You were the first. Make sure you're not the last, and beneath it, a small, jagged shard of mirror, wrapped in gauze, still warm tonight. As I look out my window, I notice something strange. The stars above the city are too bright to close. One of them blinks. Not a flicker, a blink, and I realize it's not the sky I'm looking at, it's something looking back.